Good morning. This video is intended to give you a very brief overview into NoEstimates, why it's so useful, but also to highlight some of the limitations in using it, and I shall do so via the medium of potatoes. I'm preparing roast potatoes for a big family dinner. I have a pile of potatoes on the side and I am peeling them ready to cook. My wife asks me, how much longer will it take to peel the rest of the potatoes? If I count how many potatoes I have peeled in the last 5 minutes, which is 10, and I count how many I've still got left to do, which is 30, with that information I can quickly and easily calculate a remaining forecast of just 15 minutes. And that's it. NoEstimates forecasting in a nutshell. It really is just as simple as that. However, the mathematics require a certain set of assumptions, and there are a few flaws in the system that you need to be aware of. My first assumption is that I'm comparing potatoes with potatoes. Because I'm using my output as a predictor, it needs to be reflective of my backlog. The first assumption becomes evident when I'm preparing the potatoes. For the purposes of this metaphor, an unpeeled potato represents an unrefined user story. When I'm getting potatoes ready for cooking, I would like them to be broadly similar in size. They don't all have to be the same size, but if they are similar, then I get a more consistent cooking experience. Large potatoes will take longer to cook and they may mask some of the problems. Smaller ones may have a disproportionate preparation time or may end up being overcooked. So when I select an unpeeled potato, I assess it, and in some cases I may decide it doesn't need splitting or slicing and simply needs a little refining, so I peel it. But some potatoes are big and need peeling and splitting and slicing into more manageable bite-sized pieces. And finally, there are some potatoes that when you start to peel, you discover that they are just bad and throw them away, or as you split them, you discover that some pieces are bad and they can be discarded. This time, if my wife comes along and asks me how much longer it can take, I can look at my pile of sliced potatoes and I can count how many I've done in the last 5 minutes, which is 18. I can also count how many potatoes I still have left to peel, which is 30. The problem is, I don't know how many unpeeled potatoes were needed to produce 18 sliced potatoes, because I'm not comparing like for like. To be able to give that forecast, I would have needed to count how many unpeeled potatoes it took to create that many sliced potatoes, information I don't have. Maybe I could take a guess and use that guess to extrapolate a forecast, but that sounds like guesswork rather than forecasting. The second assumption is that I know when I'm going to be done. My backlog needs to be reflective of all of the work I need to do, or at least all of the work I need to forecast. If we go back to the previous example and say that after 5 minutes I have 18 sliced potatoes, the problem now is that I'm just pulling a few potatoes at a time from the sack, and I'm judging my output as to whether or not I'm done. Or maybe I just don't know exactly how many people are coming for dinner, and I'm just adding a few more potatoes each time I find out about a new guest. I'm simply adding work as I need it. My aim is to judge when I'm done so I can start cooking. The problem here is it's very difficult to forecast when you don't know how much work you have left to do. The third assumption when dealing with NoEstimates is the assumption that the past is reflective of the future. Let's say that it took me 5 minutes to peel 10 potatoes. And just as before, there are 30 potatoes still left to peel. But the thing is, I started with the small ones. Oh, there are still 30 potatoes left to peel, but this time by my son. I can't assume that my son will work at the same pace as me, or in the case of the small potatoes, I can't assume that a small potato will take as long to peel as a large potato. In either situation, I can't forecast with any confidence. So in summary, number 1, when forecasting, it is better if we use actual elapsed time as the basis of our forecasts. This takes into account distractions and the myriad of other elements that make up a normal working day. Using perfect pair days, for example, is not really a help for forecasting, even if your estimates are accurate, which they rarely are. Whilst it may be reflective of how long was spent on a task, it is not reflective of how long it took to complete the task, and that difference is crucial. 2. When forecasting, your metrics should be comparing like for like. Comparing completed user stories, where there are some that have been split or discarded, with a backlog of unrefined stories is going to lead to misleading data and misleading forecasts. 3. Do you expect the future to be reflective of the past? If your team has changed, or if you've been working on some low-hanging fruit or on a complex area of the system for a while, and the next area of focus is different, you can't expect the same results. 4. You need to understand what it is that you're forecasting. Saying, I can deliver 10 stories a week is not a forecast, it is a velocity. However, being able to say that I predict I will complete 10 stories this week is a forecast. A forecast is the combination of knowing what your end state will be and using metrics to calculate when that may be achievable. Forecasting is always a risk, and NoEstimates is no different to any other type of forecasting. In software in particular, there are a great many unknowns which make work unpredictable, and forecasting is difficult. So long as you bear in mind the limitations, NoEstimates allows for a quick and easy way to predict the future based on recent activity. NoEstimates is a really useful tool for forecasting, but perhaps the real question should be, what problem is it that you're trying to solve with your forecasting? Thank you for listening. If you found this useful, you can find more at www.yorkesoftware.com.